Hi everyone, I'm Emily Teague, and today we are back in my Brooklyn home studio to talk about using gels within fashion and portrait photography. Gels are these colorful sheets of plastic that you can cover your light source with, whether that's a strobe or a continuous light, and they come in all sorts of colors and densities. So if I want just a little kiss of color, I'll go with a less thick sheet, and I'll go thicker if I want more color. There are two main types of gels, corrective and creative. The corrective gels are meant to fix the color temperature of the light in your scene. So if it needs to be a little warmer, you can use an orange gel, which is referred to as a CTO. Or if you want it to be on the cooler side, you can use a blue gel, also called a CTB. Today, we'll be focusing on the creative gels, which are used to add mood and drama. The first time I ever played with gels was when I was starting out at 17 years old and didn't know much about artificial lighting. So my model and I went out to this field at nighttime and I covered the car's headlight with a red gel and cranked my ISO to 1250. And while I don't remember how it was supposed to look in my mind, it ended up looking like shots from a real low-budget horror movie. Because I was shooting with no ambient light and my only light source was covered with a red gel, my model ended up being entirely red, which I remember being a surprise. My hope for this video is to prevent some of the frustration and confusion that my 17-year-old self had to go through and hopefully encourage you to play with gels if you haven't before. So let's start shooting. So I've got my friend Luciano modeling for us today. If you've seen some of my past videos, you might recognize him. Before we get started, just one more thing to note is color theory. It's really important to remember color theory when you're using gels. And so keeping that in mind, I've opted for a neutral color palette for Luciano. He's wearing black and white. And then for my background, I've also decided on a neutral color. And that's gonna also allow me to change the color of my background with gels. So for this first look, I'm going to be lighting Luciano like I normally would. There's not gonna be any color on him, but my background I have decided is going to be a nice orange tone. So let's look at this lighting setup. I have a Elinchrom ELC 500 strobe up here paired with a 39-inch softbox, and there's no gel on this light. So this is just gonna be hitting him. And then if we move over here, behind this V-flat, I have another Elinchrom ELC 500 paired with this orange gel. And what I'm doing with this to change the background color, I'm not hitting the background directly like that because that wouldn't be even. So instead, I'm feathering it and having it go straight past the backdrop. Now, if I didn't have this V-flat here, that light would be hitting Luciano and it would be giving him some color, which I don't want. So to block this from spilling onto him, I've put this V-flat right about here. And because I have my modeling light on, I can actually see where that light is falling when I look over here. So I can kind of move this and make sure that it is not going to hit him. So if you look at his arm especially, you can see if I move it, right there, it's gonna hit him, it's gonna spill onto him. And then as I move this V-flat, right there, now he is isolated and will just affect the background. So let's take some shots real quick. Oh, and before we do, let's talk about settings. My shutter speed is at 1/200th of a second. My aperture is at f5 and my ISO is at 100. So let's try some shots. So I took a few shots both with and without my gelled light, just so I could see the difference that it's making. And without it, I think this shot looks fine. It's simple. It's a little boring to me, but it looks all right. And then once I add that gel, it starts getting a lot more dynamic. It just adds a level of intrigue that I'm happy with. And so just to see what it would look like when I have Luciano take 2 steps back and that orange light is hitting him, you can kind of see there's a lot of orange on his side. It doesn't necessarily look bad, but it doesn't look even to me either. So that's why I'm trying to keep just the background lit. It'd be a little different if I maybe had a gel on the other side too, but for now I really like just having the background with the gel on it, having Luciano separate. I think this looks pretty cool. So let's move on to our next look. Okay, so for this next setup, I have done the opposite of what I did before. So for my first look, I wanted to only affect the background and not have anything spill onto Luciano. This time, I only want the light kind of giving him a highlight on the edge of him, and I want my background to not be affected. So instead of what I did before with flagging, this time I have flagged it. So if my light is gonna spill right here, it's not gonna go onto the background. It's just gonna be hitting Luciano. And Luciano, if you turn this way, beautiful. You can kind of see with the modeling light on where it's gonna be hitting. So it's gonna be falling right here. And if what I want is just to kind of create like a little backlight and put some color into the shadows on him, because I still have my main light, my key light over on this side, which is primarily gonna be lighting him. So I'm adding just a little bit of color. And if I move this light forward, let's say if if I'm the light and I'm shooting right here, it's just gonna be a lot more of a color wash that might feel like a little bit too much or isn't what I'm going for this look. So let's try some shots out and see how this is looking. So this look is pretty different from our last. First thing to note is our background. It's really dark. So I've moved Luciano forward quite a few feet, and I've done this for a few reasons. One, I like that dark background and I like not having color on it, not having it look how it does in person, which is a light gray. I feel like it's much more dramatic, and having the gel, it kind of leans into that drama. So I've moved him forward. I've also flagged this light so the light's not spilling onto the background. And then with my main key light here, I've dropped it quite a bit just because I really want to make sure those catch lights are still in his eyes. So I think light looks lovely on him. I love this kind of teal highlight that we have going behind him. I played around with Luciano a little bit, just seeing if he moved more this way towards the teal light and what that wash would look like. But I really like it when it's just a bit more of a harder edge, that kind of back highlight defining him. So happy with this. Let's try one more look. So for this next look, I am revisiting that fully saturated red look that I tried when I was 17, but this time a little more deliberately. I want to convey a lot of power and strength and make it really dramatic. So he's just gonna be silhouetted for this one. So Luciano, if you step a little bit forward, maybe one more step, right about there. So I have two strobes with a shallow 39-inch Rotalux and a deep 39-inch Rotalux, and they are facing towards each other. I'm not too worried about the spill on the background because I feel like a little bit is gonna be all right, so I'm not gonna flag those off. And I'm just gonna have a nice line of highlight, kind of what I did earlier with my teal, but on both sides. And this time I'm not using a key light. So I'm just using these two lights, and it's gonna kind of be a little bit of a silhouette, but with some really nice red highlights in there too. So let's play and see what we've got. And for settings, I am at 1/200th of a second. My aperture is at 7.1, and I'm at 160 for my ISO. So let's play around. This one is a really creative, dramatic look, and I'm wanting to make sure that even though his front is in shadow, that there's still some light spilling onto it so he's not completely silhouetted. I'm also asking Luciano to either turn and profile to the left or to the right, and that way I'm getting some of this light spilling onto his face a little bit, and that way I can kind of see his expression more. He's not just this dark head. So I'm really looking at where this light is hitting and just moving him a little bit backwards or forwards based on what I want. I did try having him directly in the middle of these two lights where it's just fully saturated red, and to me a little boring and more similar to what I did when I was 17. So I think having these highlights behind him is really fun. And that is it for today. If you haven't used gels yet or you're still learning how to, I hope this video was helpful and showed it's just a lot of fun to play and experiment with them. Thanks for watching, and if you feel compelled to leave a comment below, I will make sure to read it. I always appreciate hearing from you guys, especially my regular commenters out there. So until next time.